All right, let's get going here. I should actually introduce two first here. We've got John Joseph Adams from Lightspeed, amongst many other things, and Neil Clarke from Clarkesworld, and we've got Scott Andrews here from Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and I'm Norm Sherman here from Escape Pod and Drabblecast, and thanks a lot, guys, for being here today.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
The other day I was in browsing through a used bookstore, and here in Maryland, one of those old kind of crusty ones that you can usually find some good vintage paperbacks and stuff in the back, and they had this treasure trove of old Asimovs and analogs and galaxies, and you could go through there and see all these names of people that your average listener today might not be familiar with, like Poole Anderson and Sheckley and these greats who your younger people don't know so much because they've kind of died with these vintage paperbacks and these things. And I was thinking, today we've got our Neil Clarkes, we've got our John Joseph Adams, we've got these people that are kind of still doing that in this brand new medium, and I thought that it'd be neat to kind of have an informal, what I was thinking of calling a Lagerklatsch, to kind of have a couple drinks and talk shop for a while here with you guys and see what's up with the field and what's going on with your magazines, and horror stories and moments of glory that will inspire future people to go into the field. I thought it'd be cool to start things off just to kind of get, I don't know personally, when your moments were for when that light kind of clicked and you knew you kind of wanted to take this more seriously and start doing more editorial work than whatever else life would call you into doing. Since John is left on my screen here, why don't we start with you, John, and just kind of how your history with this whole field went.
Sure, yeah, so in college I majored in creative writing and I did some workshopping in there, and after college I thought I might like to get a job in editing, because at the time I was sort of pursuing writing, and I thought being an editor would be a cool day job to have, because one thing I learned in college was that, you're not going to be able to just write, you're going to have to get a day job. So I moved back to New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. I went to school in Florida, and so I moved back to New Jersey and started looking around for a job, and I applied at Asimov's FNSF and Analog, and yeah, so it was just like a happy accident that I happened to query Gordon Van Gelder at FNSF right at the right time. Well, it wasn't quite the right time. He didn't have any openings right when I emailed him, but then he told me to check back later in the year, and then like a couple months later, his assistant gave notice, and I followed up with him, and he's like, "Hey, come up to Hoboken for an interview." So yeah, so once I did that and I got the job, it took me all of a day to figure out that I wanted to do this as a career. So yeah, so that's how it worked for me.
How old were you at that interview?
Let's see, I was probably 23, something like that.
You're a young pup.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people, go to college right right after high school. I didn't. I actually dropped out of college when I was 16, and then I later went to community college, and then so I actually graduated college a little older than most people, but I was about 23 or so.
Huh, neat. Cool. What about you, Neil?
Well, this isn't the first career path for me. I came into editing around age 40 and sort of stumbled into it, too. I never had any plans or goals to get into it, and it found me, and I've decided that I want to leave my 20-something year career in technology and education and move over to editing. And I think the moment that sort of iced that for me was a heart attack 2 years ago, realizing that I really needed to focus on what I enjoyed in life, and this is the direction I'm heading now.
Wow. Yeah, that's a wake-up call, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Neil is part bionic man. It's amazing. So, and so how long have you been doing this, I guess, now total? How many years?
8 years. Clarkesworld is turning 8 next month.
Okay, great. Yeah, and Scott, I can see you there on video. You seem to be drinking something out of a jar.
This is a British pub mug. Did you see these in Ireland, Neil?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's full of water. I'm having a water clutch.
Okay, well, that works for me. Yeah.
Clear.
Yeah, you've got kind of a different approach to Beneath Ceaseless Skies. You've got a nonprofit model over there. How did you come to be involved in that?
That's that's sort of the coda to it all. I came up in high school as a young man writing, and I think the high school Lit Mag advisor people would tap the writers to be on the Lit Mag staff. So I got roped into that. So then I get to college, and I enjoyed doing it in high school. And my college actually had 2 lit mags. They had one that had done a lot of student stuff, but it started doing literary stuff from the literary community, and then another one had picked up the slack for the students. So I went ahead and applied and auditioned, and they picked me. And so I was on a fiction staff with a bunch of upperclassmen that was actually really, really cool. Fun fact, one of whom was Patton Oswalt, the comedian, who's brilliant, really sharp guy. And then at the end of that year, they spoke to me, and there was another freshman, and they said to the 2 of us, would you all like to be co-fiction editors next year? So I ended up being co-fiction editor of a small college literary journal for 2 years in college, which was the coolest thing I did there out of everything. And I really, really enjoyed that, the 4 years of reading and the 2 years of editing. So then I spent 6 years rotting in grad school and a postdoc. And when I finally got back to trying my own writing, or maybe 5-6 years of that, I was very interested in fantasy and other worlds, but with realistic people, character driven, with the human heart in conflict with itself, like Faulkner said. But there weren't many places publishing that. There'd be a few stories occasionally in FNSF. John probably remembers the Chris Woolrich Gaunt and Bone stories. I absolutely loved those. And there might be a few in realms of fantasy, but not very many. So after a few years of that, I said, you know what? I was an editor of some type before. I don't think I knew what I was doing at all back then. But with that sort of experience, and I was interested in this kind of fiction, and I knew from seeing people like Neil start these things up themselves that it was possible. So then at that point, looking at the models, the nonprofit model was absolutely the right thing for me, because I'm just a nerd with a compulsion about an idea. I'm not a businessman, a pioneer like Neil, and I'm not a visionary with the material like John. I'm just a guy. I know what I like, and I'd like to put that out for people and see what they think of it. So that's why I went toward that.
That's cool. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess, John, you got kind of a approach to it where you were in traditional like print publishing for a lot before you kind of made that jump into starting Lightspeed and all the different zines online. Kind of what made you do that? When did Lightspeed start, by the way? That was about 4 years ago or 5?
Well, it started in 2010, in June 2010. Okay. So, I was working at FNSF since 2001, and just the opportunity came up to do Lightspeed. Basically, in 2008, I published my first anthology, which was Wastelands, and that was really successful, and that sort of opened up the door for me to be able to do other things. And so, Prime Books approached me to do Seeds of Change, which was like a little original anthology that I did. And I say little, I mean like it was only like 40,000 words, so it was very short. And they were very pleased with how that turned out, and it sold pretty well for the little tiny book that it was. And then I did The Living Dead, and that also did really well. That even better than Wasteland. So that just opened up all kinds of doors for me. And in the wake of that success, Prime Books, they came to me again and they said, hey, what do you think about launching a magazine? And Lightspeed launched as a science fiction only magazine. Later we ended up incorporating fantasy into it, but it all came about because of that. It was all because the opportunity arose. It was kind of a big deal for me when I made that jump, because FNSF was paying me more than I was going to make even as the editor of Lightspeed, just because it was a small startup thing, and Prime Books is a small press itself, so they didn't have like a big salary that they could afford to pay me and everything. So it was kind of tenuous financially, but it seemed like a good gamble, because my anthologies were doing well at the time. I was also working as a publicist by then for Nightshade Books, so I had multiple streams of income. I was also doing some freelance writing, doing reviews and interviews and that kind of stuff. So I hated to leave FNSF because I still love it. Actually, if you guys could see, I have on my bookshelves over here, I still have every single issue of FNSF right here in my office.
Wow. Awesome. That's impressive.
I lucked into that because when I was working there, somebody wanted to sell his collection, and he had like issue 1 through whatever, like through 2002 or something like that. And so I had been trying to sort of half-assedly collect them on my own on eBay and stuff, but it's really, really hard to fill in any kind of complete collection that way. And so I just lucked out. The guy, he was like selling it for $300, and it's like $300 was a lot of money to me at the time, but I mean that was like less than 50 cents an issue or something, or about 50 cents an issue. So seemed like a pretty good deal. And the guy actually lived in Brooklyn, so I could just drive over there and pick him up. So
a lot of those were going for like $5 or $6 at this vintage bookstore was at now. So you got investment there.
Yeah, actually, when you were talking about that bookstore, I was like, I think all of those magazines would have come home with me.
Yeah, I would have had the cash to drop on it.
Yeah,
there was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if they were $5 each, I don't know if I would have bought them all, but I compulsively hoard short fiction at this point. Like I moved from New Jersey to California after I met my wife, who became the woman who became my wife anyway,
right.
I had like 50 boxes of novels and stuff, and I ended up just leaving them all there because I don't really have time to read novels anymore. It's all short fiction, but I did have to move all my short fiction, which was another 50-something boxes or more. And so now that's everything that I have in the house is just all anthologies, collections, magazines, anything that any sort of form of short fiction.
That's cool.
Yeah.
When Prime kind of like gave you the green light to start Lightspeed and everything, did they give you enough money for a staff and kind of operational costs too, or did you kind of build that up from the ground up?
No. No. I mean, it's all really tiny, and it's still tiny.
Right. Yeah.
It's like Lightspeed is making money, enough to sustain itself. So I'm not like bleeding money running it, but basically I'm putting everything back into the magazine at this point, which includes paying some staff. Now that we're actually making some money, I can pay some staff, but nobody's making a living on this. So yeah, but when Prime first started it, no, I was making a very small salary, and our nonfiction editor was making a small salary, and otherwise, basically, all the money was going to paying contributors, paying the authors, paying the artists, that kind of thing.
Right.
So no big salaries were involved ever.
Well, I've heard Neil say before that he one of his goals, maybe he's attained at this point, is to kind of do this full time. Are you there yet, Neil? Or
oh no. No, it's going to be a few years at this rate. We managed to get ourselves disqualified from semi-prosing by making too much, but the threshold for that's still pretty low. The hope is to go part-time within the next year or two.
Okay, yeah. That's I know you've got some strong thoughts on the prosing stuff. You guys have done a lot of outreach for that category, and isn't that changed now though, as far as the money that your zine can make that will make you semi-pro or pro, or is that still the same as it was before?
Oh no, the new rules went into effect a while ago, and that's why we're no longer eligible.
I gotcha.
We earned too much last year or the year before.
So they look at your tax returns and they determine.
No, you have to be honest. When they say you're a nominee, are you eligible? You say no. And we actually didn't want anyone voting for us and shifting stuff away from somebody who should be on the ballot. So we told everyone in advance, don't vote for us. We're no longer eligible.
Yeah. Well, John did pretty well this year. So congrats there, I must say.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Well, thanks, Neil, for doing that.
Perfect segue. Yeah, that's neat. What was that like, John?
Oh, it was awesome. I wish I could have been there in London to pick it up myself, and so I still haven't seen it. I haven't held it. I haven't gotten to caress my Hugo yet. But it was pretty great. Actually, we're kind of frenemies with Thomas's, who used to run Apex and now run Uncanny. I say frenemies jokingly. We sort of jokingly call them our nemesis, but really, we're friends. And so, right. Since they were up for a couple Hugos as well, we did like a Google Hangout, and we were watching the Hugos together. So that was kind of cool. And Stefan Rudnicki, who does the podcast for Lightspeed, and who is like a legendary audiobook narrator and producer, he was actually in London, and he got to accept for us, and he got a Hugo for himself, so that was nice. But it was cool that we had somebody at least from the magazine actually there to pick it up. It was just really cool regardless. Even if I couldn't be there, it's hard. I won't lie. It's like kind of hard to get nominated, like for a series of years, and then to not win, because you're like, oh man, I just want to get that one, and then I won't care, because then I can say I got my Hugo, I don't care. But it's like you just gotta get that one. And
that's how they hook you though. You're gonna be fiending for more Hugo next year.
Yeah, totally.
That's neat. Yeah. Well, Neil, you what was it like making that jump from one career to another? Like, what was it? Did you feel the field was lucrative, or did you really have a passion for sci-fi?
Is this a stand-up routine?
Oh wow! Well, I still have a day job, so I haven't made the jump yet.
Oh, okay.
But I did switch to a lower level position, so I wouldn't have to deal. I used to run all the technology for schools and universities, and now I'm in a much lower position where I don't have to supervise anyone and come home at 5 o'clock, and the rest of the time is mine. So that was sort of the first stage, was backing away from all of those. At one point I was working 70 hours a week on that job. So, and now I'm probably spending that on the magazine. So, yeah. But it's a lot of time going into it. But I enjoy it. It's something that is never the same every day. Yes, there's slush, but every story is different, and every issue is a new challenge, and so it's we're also involved in this in a very interesting time. Yeah. I mean, Clarkesworld's been around for 8 years, and in that 8 years, there's been so much change in the field. There weren't ebooks, that, at least not in the mainstream sense, when we launched in 2006. So it's been a very wild ride. It's sort of a Wild West sort of field even now, as people are still trying to figure out how to make a living doing this. So we're hoping to be the first one to cross from fully online to full-time job, but it's going to be a road, but I'm at least optimistic about it.
Yeah, well, I think that, even though we're all kind of nemesis and also friends at the same point, any one market that would go into that realm there would really bring the whole fan base up extraordinarily, which is, a huge thing. Is just outreach about this whole what is podcasting, what is short fiction, who's reading that anymore, speculative fiction, that kind of thing online. It's great. That reminded me of what you were talking about, Neil, you coming home at 5 and being like, then I've got this time for me finally. And what you really meant was like this slush time. I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on, man to man, how your personal lives sometimes are affected by that kind of, you got the day job, you come home, you normally would spend it with your girlfriend, with your kids or whatever, and there's a certain amount of extra work you have to do along with the zine. How do you manage that, or what are some of the quirks with that? Scott, I guess we haven't heard from you, Zach. What do you have?
Yeah, the time management. I'm teaching part-time. I'm married well, so that's a big part of my situation. But for me, a big casualty has been my own writing. The time required, and for me, the magazine is a different sort of thing. My own writing, my own creating is sort of a time nebulous thing. However much time it takes. But the magazine, my inbox is full of stories that people sent me, and they're expecting a response. Right. And there's a date on it. There's a ticking clock. And when that clock starts to get up to 4 weeks or so, then I start to feel that I'm letting them down. So and then also the production schedule. An issue has to come out every fortnight. A podcast, I have to edit the audio, etc. So to me, I think it's part of the sort of the deadline based aspect of it and the commitment-based aspect of it. I mean, my name is on the front, as are all of us. Our names are up on the masthead there. We are synonymous with these magazines. So if something slips or something, then it completely comes back on me. So that is a pressure and a time commitment. And I think I've been able to handle it pretty well. But my own writing has gotten a lot less time as a result.
So if we were to ask your wife, what is it like to come upstairs and see Scott with his headphones and a glass of bourbon at 1 o'clock in the morning, editing audio? Is this affecting your marriage at all? She'd be like, oh, no, it's fine. Really, his own writing is what's suffering. Yeah,
exactly. She actually really enjoys reading the stuff, and she gets to read a lot of it early before the ebooks are out. She actually proofs the podcast for me. To make sure I haven't accidentally left any little repeats or any glitches in the editing. So she gets to hear every single BCS podcast 2 days before the rest of the world. Nice. So she's actually very helpful in that regard. I talk to her about fiction and, fiction structure, craft kind of things, which we used to do back when I was writing because she would read my drafts. But she's very much the wise reader sort of view on it, as I think Orson Scott Card calls it in one of his writing books. which also means, as he mentions in the writing book, that I've kind of spoiled her enjoyment of things like movies, because she can feel, the 3-act structure isn't working here, whereas before she was just a happy viewer, not knowing anything about 3-act structure, etc.
You ruined all entertainment for her forever.
Pretty much. But no, absolutely priceless, valuable help in that. And
John, you must have a similar relationship with Christine too, as far as editing and things like that. It must be kind of fun.
Yeah, my wife is Christy Yant, who's a writer and also an editor now. She edited our Women Destroy Science Fiction special issue. Yeah,
which was awesome.
Yeah. I'm kind of lucky in that although Lightspeed isn't my day job is editing and publishing. I make my living off of publishing anthologies and publishing and editing anthologies. I don't publish all of the ones I do, but I have been publishing some of them now, and of course. I publish the magazines, although publishing the magazines and editing the magazines, that's more like my hobby that I spend way too much time on, so it doesn't eat into my, eat into my sort of family time really, because I just work a regular work day more or less, and then at the end of the day I go hang out with my family or whatever. But the other thing is that obviously all of us sort of editorial or writer types, we're not going to just stop at the regular work day. We're gonna be thinking about it and obsessing about it all the time. But it actually works out since, as mentioning, my wife's also a writer, so she she needs that time as well. So we sort of try to get ourselves into a schedule where we'll go we'll eat dinner, we'll watch some TV, and hang out with the family and everything, and then we sort of go to bed early, but then instead of going to bed, we sort of work while we're in bed, and so she'll be writing, I'll be reading, that kind of stuff. And it tends to work out, and it's like she gets on my case sometimes for not taking any time off to do stuff, because everything that I'm doing, even if it's not strictly work related, it's work related somehow.
Yeah, right.
So, but given that I just this year took on the role of I'm going to be the series editor of Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy for Houghton Mifflin. It's now I'm even busier than ever. I have to read every damn thing that's published in the genre and hunt around through mainstream journals to find out any of the science fiction that ends up in there. So, so it's like a lot, and
that's a lot.
Yeah, I've got even less excuse to ever slack off on anything.
It's daunting, and you got all this End is Nigh stuff, which I'm working with you on as far as the audio, which is neat. But that's a lot. I couldn't believe you're taking on the audio for all those stories. I was is this guy crazy?
I am crazy. I shouldn't have done that. We should have definitely outsourced the audio parts. The thing that Norm's mentioning, the End is Nigh. It's the first book in a series of anthologies I'm calling the Apocalypse Triptych, which I'm co-editing and co-publishing with Hugh Howey. And the second book just came out called The End Is Now, and the audiobook's coming out on around the 15th or so, hopefully. But because it's still in progress. But I have a producer that I'm working with, Jack Kincaid, and he's doing most of the nitty gritty on the producing. But I was lining up the narrators and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I have been very involved, and it's been much more work than I was initially anticipating. But we probably should have outsourced that. But we were trying to do everything DIY. We were like, we're going to do it all ourselves, and why not do the audiobook ourselves too? So. Because we did every other part of it. Hugh laid out the print edition, I laid out the ebook. So it was like we literally just did it all ourselves. We didn't design the cover; we did hire out for that. But
right.
We were trying to do it all DIY, and maybe we shouldn't have done that for the audiobook, but. It turned out pretty well, though, I think.
Yeah, I'm hearing good things, and you got awesome people like me helping you out there.
That's fine. And I love your narration, so it was really cool to get you to be able to do this, and you're just a perfect fit for some of the things that we got you narrating here, like the Will McIntosh stuff. It's just your intensity really works for that.
That story is so sad. Yeah. It's like a tearjerker, big time.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, but that was, it's really ambitious. And Neil, you guys just started doing, is it every story or a weekly thing with the podcast, whereas before you kind of had a different schedule with what you're releasing your audio as?
Oh, no, we've been releasing the audio, all the stories regularly for some time now. When we first started, we were doing just one a month, but now we've been doing all of them. And as we increase the volume of stories we do, we add it to the podcast. And I think it's a test of how much cake can take.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and if things go well, we'll be adding another one on top of that. Starting in January.
Are you guys starting a new zine?
No. We're right now we're running a Kickstarter campaign to fund a Chinese translation project.
Oh, right. Okay, I saw that on Twitter.
So that'll be an additional story onto the pile each month, and probably with words that'll require some thinking.
Yeah.
So.
Now, do you do an audio version and a print version of every story just because there's an audience kind of for each? Some people like to read, some people like to listen, or what's your kind of reasoning behind that?
Yeah, actually, when we first started the magazine, we sort of figured, well, we'll go wherever the readers are. And, when we found out there was an audience for audio, we started doing podcasts. We did print because there's some people who only read print. And the digital editions, just whatever format we needed to. I've been somewhat reluctant to do a PDF version. I refuse to consider a PDF an ebook.
Why is that? Just because it's a headache, or?
Because okay, I'm coming from technology.
Yeah,
PDF
right.
was meant to print documents. It's portable document format. It was designed so that you could email something, print it out, and read it. It's really not designed for screen reading. It's designed for paper reading. So I think it's kind of counterintuitive to call it an ebook. It's really a distribution format.
Gotcha.
But I'm picky that way, and I know a number of people disagree with me, particularly in the academic side of textbooks and all of that.
Right.
Where you need fixed layout formats.
What formats do you feel that are most downloaded or accessed by the consumers?
Well, the web version is definitely accessed more than any of the others.
Really, more than
and audio behind that, and then I would say
because they're free.
Right.
Yes, because they're free. But of the copies that sell, it's Amazon has the lead by far. EPUB's a distant second, and then we have a Google app or Android app and an Apple app for the magazine as well, and they come in after that. So. But we keep doing whatever formats help reach more readers, and some of them bring in money, and that's good too.
Yeah. Are the anthologies you do that you sell, are those is the goal to kind of reach out to new listeners who, maybe some of your listeners have already heard the stories or read the stories already, and it's anthologized? Kind of what you're thinking behind that?
Whoever wants it.
Yeah.
We knew that initially there were people that weren't like I said, things have changed a lot in the last 8 years. And when we first started, there were people telling us, I will never, ever read your magazine because it's online. And we don't have that problem as much as we did back then. But we also have people who like to have something on their bookshelf, and I'm one of them. So, it's for those people. And it's nice to have something physical to be able to give to the authors, sell at conventions, at readings and other places like that. Plus, we get some amazing art, and it feels wrong not to have it in print somewhere.
Right. Huh. Yeah, because I'm just asking because we've been thinking about doing kind of like an e-zine, and weighing a lot of these options, and I kind of wanted to see how lucrative or how much work. So we don't do something like what John just kind of self-confessed about, how outsourcing audio would have been a good thing. Kind of some mistakes to avoid if somebody's starting a zine. What formats to use? Does it break even, or is the goal to kind of take a little bit of a loss but to reach out to more audience, that kind of thing? I guess what are your thoughts on that?
The place to make money is subscriptions, digital subscriptions.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're going to start anywhere, start with that, and I would head over to start talking with Weightless Books, because they're probably your best bet at this point in time. Amazon's been they shut the door on the program that John and I and I think Apex and maybe one or two others got in, and we can't even, if any of us had anything else we wanted to do, we couldn't get them to sell it. So it's unfortunate. It's one of our major and that's sort of cut off for a lot of people. But Weightless is a great alternative. A lot of people reading or getting small press magazine subscriptions through there. and they're great people to work with.
Yeah, that's interesting about Amazon. Why do you think they cut that?
I don't know. It was it doesn't seem like it would be any work for them to just leave it going because it runs off a feed. It was more of a nuisance for me to make the feed,
right,
than it was for them to build the thing. Everything's automated on their side. It was a money machine. Basically, it was Amazon's ATM for magazines.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they closed. It was always listed as a beta product, and it never launched into. It was a beta for years, and it just never opened up past that.
Yeah, has this affected you, Scott? Your online sales?
Well, I cannot get sales through Amazon subscriptions. So yes, I mean it's disappointing that that's not an avenue at all. BCS started while they were open. And while you and John were talking about DIY for audio, I was nodding my head. I'm one of these poor folks who can't delegate, so I do almost everything myself. I have a first reader, and that's it. So it takes me some time to get around to things, and by the time I finally got around to digging into the Amazon subscriptions, sure enough, the bastards had closed. So it really is too bad that option is not available. But what can you do? Waitlist came along, and so it's been great to work with them. I'm also sort of in a bit of a gray area. As part of the nonprofit mission, I want the fiction to be available as cheaply or as free as possible. Because as a nonprofit, you have to justify your purpose. Why is the world a better place for you existing? Why, and the IRS are the ones who's asking these questions. Why do you deserve to be tax free? So I am selling ebooks, and I'm also giving away the ebook files on the website. So there's a bit of a catch-22 there. How can you get people to pay for something they can get for free? And we've been able to work around that a little bit by putting ebooks out early, a couple weeks before the issue goes live on the website, and charging the absolute lowest we possibly can. So single issues of BCS in Kindle Store are 99 cents because that's pretty much as low as we can go. And when we sell ebooks, when we have an ebook sale, I do often mention in there, we just had our Best of BCS Year 5 anthology come out, which is 17 stories for $4 as an ebook. And yes, you could go find all those stories for free on the website and save all of their individual files and, compile them into a big file of your own. But when we're selling these in these posts, I always say, yes, you can get these in a convenient package and you can help support us. So I'm trying to leverage that support factor as well and let people know that if they will cough up a little bit for the ebook, that money's all going to go straight back into the magazine to pay contributors. Yeah. And I'm hoping that it's a bit of the iTunes model. You remember back in the mp3.com, et cetera, Napster days, people would snag music for free. iTunes comes along, and part of it's their cool device, but part of it is also setting the price point low enough that people are like, what the hell? It's easier just to pay them $1 and get the MP3 than to go BitTorrent or whatever. So I'm also trying to play on that to try and hit that low sweet spot where people will cough up just a bit of money and knowing that it'll support and come back into the magazine.
And John, do you use more premium content kind of models, right? Like you have some that's for free and then some that you kind of hold back for certain zines?
Not too much, actually. I mean, we do have a little bit of that. Lightspeed, we include a novella reprint in every issue of the ebook that isn't available on the website, but that's really it on a regular month. Our Women Destroy Science Fiction issue actually has a bunch of exclusive content that's only in the print or ebook edition, and of course it's available actually in print, which most of our issues are not, because that's because we crowdfunded it and we mega funded what we were asking for and everything, and so that made the issue into such a huge behemoth that we actually couldn't put it all on the website without restructuring how the website is actually designed to display content. And so we're like, okay, well, we can still give everybody the same amount of content they're used to getting in Lightspeed, and then we'll just, since this is a special issue, we'll have that other stuff reserved for people who want to actually buy the ebook and support the magazine that way. So So that one actually has about twice as much content as a regular issue, and so if you buy the regular issue, which actually costs the same as a regular issue, you get all that additional content.
But regular issues are always online too for free.
Yeah. So I mean, it's basically like the same thing what Scott was saying, is that you try to convince people that, hey, this is a convenient way to get it. It'll get delivered to your device every month. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. And I mean, I think it's really easy once you convince people to try that. It's really easy to convince them how much value there actually is in that. Like, I mean, me personally, like, I don't want to read something on my phone or on my Kindle or whatever that I just download off the website. I'd much rather just have it delivered in a convenient package. Because it's going to be formatted nicely. I don't have to worry about like some tool that I send it to my device with that it mangles the formatting or something. Or if you send you send Word docs to yourself on your Kindle or whatever, and it's just so much more of a hassle than just getting something that you can subscribe to and it just shows up every month.
Yeah. It's just funny, like thinking about what the editors of yesteryear, what they must have been talking about if they had the simpler readings. Not these same conversations at all. About how to monetize the John W. Campbells, but their conversations would have been more like
it would have been a lot more racist.
Yeah, how can we get more powerful white men teaching lessons to different races and women? And Neil, I was wondering, you've been doing this for 8 years now, and John, I guess all of us have been doing this for at least 7 or 8 years. Kind of those gleaming moments among the slush when you're kind of reading and you're bummed out a little bit and you'd rather be doing anything other than reading a shitty story that's in front of you, or the mountain of work just keeps piling up in front of you, and then you come across an awesome story by an awesome author that you maybe never heard of before. Or I know, like winning a Hugo, both you guys have you won your Hugo yet there, Scott? Is it still in the future?
No. Okay. Hopefully in the future, up for the World Fantasy Award in a couple months.
Okay, well, I got my fingers crossed.
Thank you.
That's got to be a career highlight. But like, what's some of those important moments where that made it all worthwhile?
Let's see. The last Hugo Award we won was really personal for me because it was from the year where I had the heart attack and all these other things going wrong in my life. And here the magazine just did good. We had a great year and people responded to it. So being able to, I don't remember receiving the award. I remember getting up to the stage, blacking out basically, and being backstage afterwards. So I only found out what I said by watching the videotape. And I went off my original script. So it was definitely one of the better moments. And unfortunately, I only have video to remember it by.
Yeah.
And, even though going this year to the award ceremony up for editor short form like John, but my dad came with me. So having my dad there in the audience, and we were in the front row watching all of this, and it was great to show him that world because he's totally disconnected from it and had no idea what my life in that world was like. And now he understands it. So it was a very nice personal moment. And I think those are the things that tend to stick with me the most are those personal moments where something just clicks and feels right. And it's why I'm doing this, because I'm finding so much of that in this job.
Yeah. It's actually touching about that for me. Scott, do you remember when we were at, was it Capclave last year? We were listening to Gardner go on with who all was on the panel up there. And I remember Neil and his kid were there, his son, and that's kind of a neat generational. I don't think that disconnect is going to be there with you and your son, because your son's a future science fiction writer, author. You're kind of grooming him. We were talking about before, which is neat. But that's definitely cool to kind of open up your relative who's never it's really hard to explain what we do sometimes, and so to have them see it.
I've done things where, we were on vacation once and it was raining, so we were trapped in the hotel room, and I sat in the bed and the boys plopped down next to me, and now they're my oldest is 14 now, and the youngest is 11, and this was probably about a year ago. They sat on the bed next to me and said, "Entertain me," basically. So I started reading the slush to them.
Oh God!
And they were rolling on the bed laughing at some of the stuff.
See, we couldn't do that at Drabblecast, not with our slush.
Yeah. Well, no.
Unless your kids are in the unicorn race.
There were stories that I skipped, but there's one that they still remember, and they joke about it, and it's inspired both of them now to submit stories to the magazine under pseudonyms. Neither one of them has been smart enough not to use their own email address, but I still think it's kind of cool that they're writing and actually sending something out, even though they don't expect it to be published. They get it, and I'm hoping that sticks with them. And I never had that as a kid. I read all of this stuff, and my dad supported me as a reader, but I never connected like that. And I think it's kind of neat to maybe one day they'll take over for me. Yeah.
John, what's it like telling your relatives at Thanksgiving and stuff, like what you do?
Yeah, it gets a little complicated. I mean, my mother gets it, my sister gets it, I don't have much extended family on my side, but then, now that I'm married, I have my wife's family, and she was adopted, so her birth family gets it. But then her adoptive family, they don't really get it. I mean, like, some of them kind of do, but it's just like, it's always a little awkward and trying to, really explain what it is that I do but I mean, they're pretty understanding. I mean, all things considered, I can't say that I have too many complaints. It's not like I mean, I can imagine much worse situations, where people just they think you're a leech on society or something because all you're doing is creating science fiction or whatever instead of doing something like a real job, or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to say like stripping or something like that, But
well, that makes an obvious
that's a worse situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotta have strippers.
Yeah.
Gotta keep the poles warm. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, my dad's a scientist, and my degree's in chemistry, so he and I relate very well in that real world sort of level. But I think he's read like 2 or 3 fiction books in his entire life. He just does not grok the concept of things that aren't real. My mom was really the one I connected with on that. She was the one who took me to the library when I was a little kid, where they had big wall posters of the Derek K. Sweet Lord of the Rings paperback cover art from late 70s, early 80s. And she had a bunch of old SF from the late 60s, early 70s before I was born. So she was really the one that I connected with over that. And she actually passed away a few years before BCS, but I think she really would have liked it. The gadgetry, definitely, the ebooks and readers, but the whole idea of online fiction and the handiness of being able to read this on the treadmill. She probably would have loved the podcast too. So definitely, and I was thinking about that while Neil was talking about his cool father-son moment. If I am fortunate enough to give an acceptance speech at some point, then that'll definitely be on my mind. But I have all her old 70s SF and all that stuff, so I'm sort of continuing the legacy from that very much, of being taken to the library as a little kid. So she definitely would have gotten it, and I might have roped her into being proofreader or the magazine accountant or something, because she definitely would have enjoyed that.
That's neat.
Actually, speaking of mothers, I should probably give my mother a little bit more credit. If
That's my cat.
I thought it was a goat.
It did sound like a goat.
He's as big as a goat.
If not for my mother having a copy of Jurassic Park sitting on a table when I was 16 or 17, I don't know that I would have ended up here. It's that's what sort of started my pursuit into science fiction and everything, because it's after I read that, it blew my mind, and I was like, oh my god, I gotta find more stuff like that. And of course, in retrospect, I can see now that that book and all of Crichton's are sort of anti-science fiction in a way, because science fiction is the bad guy in all of his stories. But but it got me started, and it's it taught me that hey, I can read this stuff that has equations and shit in it. And it's full of science. There's so much science in that book. I mean, probably twice as much as most science fiction novels that I actually read. So, but yeah, that got me started, and so it's all because my mom just had it sitting there. I don't even know if she had read it, but I mean, she did have it. So.
Yeah, that's funny. It reminds me of, I think I was in 4th grade, and my mom had a copy, or I don't know if it was my mom or my dad, probably my dad, but it was a copy of Jaws, Peter Benchley's Jaws, sitting around. And I remember, just as a young kid, had a big shark on the front, and any kid's going to grab that, and I flipped and didn't see any pictures and started reading it, and I remember being blown away, because chapter 2 I was like, holy fuck, this is from the shark's perspective. Like, that was the first time I'd ever encountered that, you know. Then it's just seeing the legs and things, and I didn't know books were written like that, and it really hooked me into all sorts of weird shit from that point on. You know, when you can write from a shark's perspective, you know, you're reaching out to the stars. It's neat. So, did you have like a book that you kind of remembered as a kid, Neil?
Oh yeah, my cousin gave me 3 books one year, and I was around 12. One was Stranger in a Strange Land, the other was The Hobbit, and then Adventures in Space and Time, which is a massive collection of Golden Age science fiction. I still have it on my shelf, and that's sort of what got me hooked into short fiction. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking giving a 12-year-old Stranger in a Strange Land.
I know, I was going to say.
But, you know, it does explain some of my taste in fiction, probably, but...
Okay, I thought you were going a different direction with that. Like, it does explain certain behaviors that, you know, that'd be kind of questionable or strange to our culture, but... Yeah, no, that's a pretty heavy book that redefines sex and everything. So yeah, that would be awesome when you're 12. So maybe The Hobbit was more standard fare, I think, for us 12-year-olds back then. But that's neat.
You know,
yeah.
You know, it's funny how we identify with literature over the course of our lives, because you know, it's like. I mentioned Jurassic Park when I was like 16 or whatever, but like looking back, like earlier than that, it's like, I mean, basically everything I read as a kid was science fiction or fantasy in some form or another. Like I read all the Piers Anthony Xanth novels, and like I read the Robert Asprin Myth series and all kinds of stuff like that. And so it's like, it's funny that, you know, how I can have read all of that stuff and obviously watched tons of media like, you know, Star Trek and all kinds of stuff, but not really identify as like, oh, I really want to pursue this like 100%, like until you get to that one book that sort of like breaks the doors open.
Right.
And it's funny because like I didn't even get into short fiction until much later. It wasn't actually until I started writing that even the concept of a short story really occurred to me, because you know, I would read these writing books and they would talk about them, and I was like, oh, where do short stories appear? You know, right. I mean, I lived in a town that we didn't have any. The bookstore didn't have any fiction magazines. I mean, maybe they had like something that would run one like the New Yorker, but not like a fiction magazine like FNSF or something. So it was quite a revelation to even discover those to me.
You know, that's a really good. I was thinking about that in my used bookstore experience. I was thinking, this is so much short fiction that nobody will ever know about. This stuff from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even maybe the 90s that isn't going to be on the internet. Nobody's going to pick up because there's just so many volumes of it. And a lot of it's really good stuff. It's just, you could make 3 or 4 new zines just reprinting that stuff almost, you know. But who has the time to go through and read if you haven't read it already? But it's an epic thing, some of those stuff that's going to die. What do you guys think about our new generation? You know, you don't have to talk shit about anybody, but like as far as the Hugo's just coming out, like the best novel, some of those, were you generally happy that, you know, some of these certain malevolent characters didn't swindle their way in this year, or, you know, who won what? Yeah.
Well, I was definitely happy with the semi-prosing category. I have to really,
of course,
really be pleased with that. But no, I mean, very, very good year this year. I think like Anne Leckie winning was great, and to see her just sweep all the awards was really great. You know, and I mean, just generally, I think a lot of the winners just seemed like a breath of fresh air. Like Cameron Hurley winning, and you know, Aidan Moher winning for fanzine. Like all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's nice to see change, you know, happening, and I was pretty pleased with the results.
Yeah, I think John Chu's story was my favorite of the short story ones too, so I was happy with that. And I hadn't read the best novel yet, so it's still on my kind of list. I'm really jealous that you can read novels and things like that in your spare time between all the short
no, I can't. I haven't read novels in forever. I was glad to see her because she's nice, and I like her, and it seemed like a cool book, and it was like the type of thing that's like, it's nice to see something like that win. You know, I haven't actually read it, but. Yeah.
What about you, Neil? Were you more or less happy?
Oh, I was very pleased with the results, and you know, I was talking to some of to Anne and John and a few other people before the award ceremony, and you know, it's nice to see people who, you know, everyone is hoping for them to win, and they're convinced they're going to lose, and then to see them win is, you know, you can see that look of shock on their face. It's priceless, and they were so deserving this year. They did such a awesome job. So I had gotten to read Anne's novel, and I don't know how I managed to squeeze it in. I think I only squeezed in a few novels last year. And John's story was one of the best on the list, and definitely, I think it was a good slate overall, with, of course, the notable exceptions of the things that people don't want to talk about.
Yeah,
well, I love seeing names move up on these lists that are people whose names that I know from years past. Anne, I published a story by Anne maybe 4 years ago. I mean, she'd already sold plenty of short fiction at that point, but hadn't written novels yet. Aliette de Bedard, I met at a workshop 8 years ago, and I published a number of her early things. And of course, she sold a lot to Neil, and been on Hugo ballots since then. Benjamin Sridwenga, who was up for the Campbell, came through my slush pile 3 years ago. You talked about the moments of serendipity a little while ago. That was one that was just an amazing piece. I'd never heard of her. Seth Dickinson, who was ineligible for the Campbell because of the story of his that came through my slush pile 3 years ago. It just blew me away. I know. And I think the issue it ran in was like December 27. So if I'd waited I know. And I apologized to him.
I'm sure that made it better.
Great.
I'm sure he forgives you completely.
You know, actually, that story is the one he's expanded into a trilogy now that he's got to deal with Tor. So I don't think he minds. Yeah. And he's doing great. I mean, his science fiction stories that Neil has done are amazing. Saladin Ahmed last year, I published his first genre sale 5-6 years ago. That was the origin story of those novel protagonists. I met him at a workshop too. He was my roommate. We hang out and drunk together. So seeing people like that, Yoon-Ha Lee, I met her at a workshop 10 years ago. She'd already sold multiple times to John and Gordon at FNSF. But seeing people like that who might have blown me away in the slush pile, or whose stuff I read years ago in FNSF or someplace like that, seeing those people trickle to the top of the major recognition that I think they deserve from having read their stuff. That sort of reinforces my faith in the overall audience, and also reinforces perhaps the belief that I'm not crazy by thinking their stuff was so great. You know, you never know. I think this is awesome. Who knows? I'll put it in the magazine, and Lois Tilton will scowl at it, and nobody else will like it. But it is, especially being a niche kind of person and a niche magazine, I find it very refreshing when stuff that I think is cool appeals to other people as well. And seeing some of these names trickle up to the top of the ballots has been very, very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't get a whole lot of pats on the back and things in this. What about those the opposite of that spectrum? Those days where you got you just don't want to deal. What are those moments that make you just want to hang it up in your career so far?
Not hang it up, but I think when I get the most frustrated, I think part of being a niche fantasy magazine and having the fantasy cover art is that we do get sent a lot of fantasy short fiction by amateur writers who may be fans of fantasy novels but not know much short fiction. So maybe they're more used to the pacing of fantasy novels or the amount of exposition that's in a fantasy novel. And maybe also these writers are not really good at carrying that off. So we get tons of things in the slush pile. Stories, I think my pet peeve is stories that open in a fantasy tavern. And then the characters get together and, form their adventuring party, etc. And I just see so much of that. And, we mentioned it on our guidelines. I mentioned it at panels. Please try to find some more interesting and different way to start your story. And, when you get 10 of those after having read Slush for 90 minutes, we also do all personalized rejections. So I'm trying to find something in this story to complement. And that can get to be a bit of a drudgery when those keep coming in.
I just want to say that's really impressive that you do all personal rejections. It's not something I could ever take on in my markets. It's a big commitment. It's a good thing for you. It's a star on your lapel there, I think.
I think so. And that was part of me being a writer and coming through workshops, is that feedback can be really, really valuable. And I remember when my submissions to FNSF to John started getting maybe 2 lines instead of just 1 line. I mean, that was a milestone and meaningful content also. So that's the reason I do it. It makes our response times much longer than John's and Neil's. But it's important to me. And I have to give a shout out to my first readers. My former first reader, Kate Marshall, is a fellow workshop grad I know, and my current first reader, Nicole Levine, because they handle the stories that open in fantasy taverns, most of them. I still do some of the slush reading. So they're a huge help with that. And then I do the pass-ups where I often end up writing, 3 or 4 lines. Some of these people are workshop grads from some of the workshops I went to. So I'm offering what I think, but also trying to frame it in an instructive way. I think my workshop critiquing experience crops up there some. So it's a labor of love, and I believe it's important, but it definitely does add to the time commitment.
Yeah. Neil, what are some of the headaches you've had so far? Some moments that made you scared for your life?
Well, the thing, usually it's not a story, because I can stop reading the story and move on. I've had some that have disturbed me that I've put in a folder marked crank. I have one person who's sent me several hundred emails that all ended up in crank. And harassed my authors and did all sorts of annoying things. And that still wasn't enough to make me think much more than how do I get rid of this guy? And, not how do I get out of this? I think the most frustrating times for me were when we were first starting back in 2006 and 2007, where people were going, "You're not going to make it. You're insane. No one reads online fiction." All of that stuff, all the negativity, we haven't seen much of that anymore. So, there hasn't really been anything that's made me go, "Oh, I need to stop doing this." But
I guess there's no point. You can't tell "I told you so" to all the people who back 2007 were saying that. So that must be frustrating.
Yeah, well, no, we did, you know what? Our first Yugo, that was the "told you so."
Oh, okay, big middle finger to the world.
Yeah. It was, that was one of those moments where it was like, see, we can do this. And having stories win awards or make year's bests and all of that, and the reviews don't matter that much to me, but the award recognition is sort of a nice little pat on the back. And but the best side of it is the emails that I get from our readers or some of the writers, even some of the ones we've rejected. It's funny how rejections can actually turn into a conversation at a convention. In London, for example, I carry these cards that say "rejected by Clarkesworld," and there's a little guy on it that's in a straitjacket, which is probably would be me if I was doing personalized rejections. Whenever the story behind the card is that people used to come up to me at conventions, point at me and go, "You rejected me." Oh God. That was their hello. Now, I never knew whether or not that was a sign for me to run or they were just being funny. So I made these cards, and now whenever somebody does that to me or even mentions that they've been rejected, I hand them one of these cards, and it says "rejected by Clarkesworld" on the front, and on the back it says, "The bearer of this card was rejected by Clarkesworld. Please be nice to them." Nice. And if they smile when they get that card, I'm safe. So, but these cards have now gotten a life of their own. So we end up with conversations that go on about submitting stories and working on the magazine and the cards history and all of that. So it turned into a nice little thing out of, something that was a little frightening. Yeah, presumably from the people who have all at this point smiled when they saw it, not the people. Well, nobody has growled or torn it up. Okay.
So I get emails from writers thanking me. I get a couple a week thanking me for the comments and the rejections. And every couple of months or so, I'll get one that says, "This story that you rejected and gave me these comments, I tweaked it and sent it off, and it's sold to this other place." I think one to F&SF once. And that is what really makes all that work feel worthwhile. Or when I get another story by that person, get their next story, and their next story is much, much better.
Yeah, that's always better than it being much, much worse. And you
right, especially if it's worse because of something I suggested they do. That's never happened.
Yeah, that's like a theoretical kind of thing you're talking about right there.
Yeah.
What about you, John? You ever have any thorns in your side doing the work you do?
Not too much these days, I don't think. I mean, I like these guys. I mean, I do have some first readers working for me. I probably have more than anybody, I would guess. I have a whole team of people. Ideally, I mean, I started doing that because I figured, well, if no one person has to read more than a few stories, then it's they're less likely to get burned out and to miss good stories because they had to plow through 30 or whatever, and because we try to keep a 2-day turnaround. So so I have a team of slush readers to help me, and now also I have a managing editor, Wendy Wagner, who also, when stuff gets passed up from the slush, it goes to her first, and then if she also thinks it's worth me looking at, then I look at it. That's just a way to sort of try to keep me free, because now I'm, with me publishing the magazine and editing it and editing all this other stuff, it's like I got to manage my time, since like I was saying, like Lightspeed's basically my all-consuming hobby,
right.
Not really a big moneymaker. So I got to draw the line somewhere, and that's a way that I was able to do that. But even so, I do read quite a bit of slush. Like when we're open, we haven't been open for a while because we got so overstocked in inventory that we've just been closed for a while. But I find that I'm pretty immune to slush at this point. Like it can't bug me, it can't annoy me. Like Neil said, I can just stop reading it, and so I do. And I mean, I kind of do that with everything in life. Like if I'm watching a TV show and I'm not into it, nope. I'm done. I'm not, if it's 5 minutes, that's enough. I'm done. And I cut out. And so I've started watching a lot of movies. I've started watching a lot of TV shows and then, don't finish. So I mean, I think I'm pretty immune to that kind of thing at this point. The only thing that really sort of bugs me most of the time is just like comments. Like I don't even know why I ever look at comments. I should get those plugins for the browser that turns all comments into like herp derp or whatever, just so I can't, to save me from myself, I can't even look at them. It's like, you mean
on your forums? Like
on anything, on anywhere. Yeah. It's just like I mean, even if it's stuff that doesn't relate to me, I get annoyed by comments. But I mean, especially when it's our stuff, So I mean, not really stuff on our website, but like on IO9 we do a Lightspeed Presents thing with them where we post one story per month on IO9 from the magazine as a way to sort of reach out to IO9 readers, hopefully to recruit some of them to get them to actually read the magazine regularly. But it's like, occasionally there's a few nice comments, but it's usually just like, it's just making me mad. I gotta close this tab and don't even look at it, because it's like, it's not like you expect everyone to always love what you put out there, but it's just like, it's like the comments are such that like, I don't know, it's like they were expecting an apple, but you gave them an orange, and they're still going to review it regardless what they thought it was going to be. And I mean, the worst is actually not magazine related, but podcast related, because I also do the Geek's Guide to the Galaxy podcast. I'm just a producer. Right. I'm a producer at this point, but I still am a frequent guest, and so Wired.com. Oh my God, the comments over there, it's like YouTube almost. I mean, there's so many trolls there. Although occasionally it's actually been very entertaining, because our host and my co-producer David Barr Kirtley, occasionally he's actually taken up the fight against them and replied to them and actually engaged them.
That's the cardinal rule.
No, I know. I thought he was crazy at first, but actually, I don't know, he has this ability to just stay completely rational and keep all of his emotion out of it, and he just rationally argues with them, and then they go away because they get bored because he's not getting mad. And so but it's actually been really entertaining, and it's actually generated some real discussions on there. Like, we've had some posts that have like 200 comments and more. And so is it a good thing? I don't know. I don't know that it made anybody listen to the podcast, but it's been entertaining a couple times. I just tend to avoid them because they just make me mad.
Yeah, but for me, there's something almost, as much as you hate reading like negative commentary about you, there's something also kind of addictive about reading it. Like I almost want to see it more than positive things, because people will say positive things about your market and stuff. But I've done Google searches. I remember one time I did a Google search for like Drabblecast sucks or Escape Pod. It's like Edgar's not, because something about me wants to read that asshole out there who's saying his worst shit, and I can read it and just soak in the pain and just cry. Not really, but for whatever reason, I'm like a glutton for that kind of thing. And I remember one time I'd done a search for Norm Sherman sucks balls, just because I was covering my bases, like somebody could have said that, and my girlfriend was like, what are you reading? And I was like, I'm just seeing what people were saying about me, and she was like, your ball sucking ability? I was like, no, just there was nothing about that on the internet, fortunately, which is awesome. because it's always good to have your name like that kind of cleared. But
so your ball sucking secrets are
safe,
they're
still exactly far underground, about 12 miles under ancient cursed tombs. Yeah, never to be released on Google. That's good. Yeah, well, that's been awesome talking to you, dudes. I wanted to kind of, I guess, wrap up convo a little bit about as far as where you see things going with your zines, and also your careers, your kind of futures. I think one thing we've kind of all pressed on is how the generation of publishers like ourselves and editors now are mostly trying to spend our time thinking outside the box and looking at the field of the changing internet and how we can kind of leverage new audiences. And the biggest thing is being adaptable and perceptive to the kind of the lay of the land. But for your own, I guess, zines in reaction to that, how do you have any kind of future long-term goals? And then I guess we can close on kind of short projects like cons and stuff, or people you're coming up on. Why don't you start us off, Scott?
To me, it's all about the sort of niche material. I mean, I got into this because I love reading that kind of stuff, and that's what sustains me and keeps me going. And maybe it's because I'm sort of an indie DIY type person. I'm just looking forward to keeping publishing great stuff of the type I like. I'm not a pioneer or trailblazer on the technical side like Neil. I'm not great at running a giant empire full of legions of slush readers like John is. I'm just sort of, plugging away in my little niche there. I guess like Conan after he's grown up and pushing that mill around or whatever with those tracks. I've worn these tracks pretty deep. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not enough of a visionary. But hopefully the new writers will keep coming through the slush pile. It'll be just as much fun to discover as some of these who are moving up the award ballots and are getting into novels and doing less short fiction. I'm very happy with the podcasts, the way they're going, and the ebooks. We do these annual best of ebook anthologies. I did one reprint theme anthology a few years ago. It was steampunk stories from BCS. I would love to do more of those theme reprint anthologies as opportunities come up. And we did start a new podcast recently. I think I talked to you about this at Balticon, called the BCS Audio Vault.
Yeah,
it takes old episodes and puts a new intro on them, maybe the author or another guest introducing it. And that's a cool way to get the back catalog out there. But that's not really, pioneering or doing something brand new. So I think my future is just completely owning the rut that I've channeled out because I like it, and there's an audience out there that enjoys that kind of work, and there are authors producing that kind of work. So I will own that rut as absolutely best I can and keep moving forward.
That's definitely. Hey, that's how the Grand Canyon got made, right?
So I've heard.
We kept on making it in there. What about? I'm curious, Scott. Fantasy in general, like the future. What is fantasy going to look like 100 years from now? Or is it still going to be the halfling on a quest?
That's a fascinating question. That's a fascinating question. If you had asked me that in 1994, of course, Robert Jordan was selling then, but the 80s wave of sort of epic fantasy like Ray Feist had kind of started to dwindle. So if you'd asked me that then, I would have said that pseudo-medieval sword-like epic fantasy, as John waves his sword, is pretty much dead. But then what happens in 95? Here comes George Martin, and he does perhaps the oldest, most common used setting. He does it in a new, different way that makes it feel amazingly different and fresh. It's the same, but different. So I think there's always the potential for someone like that to come along and completely refresh or rejuvenate something that's been done before. I think the other thing Martin's done that I like even more than the world is put a very deep, strong focus on the characters. And that's actually what I love in BCS's short fiction. And I think that's a much more subtle sort of new wave, but to me, it's even more important. So if people can come along and do things like that, can completely revamp things, then who knows? Who knows where it could go? People could be revamping things. Things might converge more with some of the other more popular fantasy media, like Warhammer and gaming and things like that, where the fantasy and science fiction seem to be blended in there, and that audience does not mind that at all. Maybe that would come into the writing, into the prose fiction. Hypertext, who knows? We'll have a generation of people who are used to texting on their phones. What will they write? How will they write it? Will people end up writing purely for audio? How will that change? So maybe it's that the view from down here in my rut is really hard to predict, but who knows? I think the sky is really the limit.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like that science fiction. I like a lot of the Stephen Baxter and Asimov stuff where you look at the whole long term of humanity's progression throughout millennia, and we become, photons and energy. At what point do we stop becoming human? Is kind of like the same thing. Like, at what point do you stop becoming fantasy? Because there is going to be a lot of George R. R. Martins who are constantly relooking the field. But at what point are you not fantasy anymore? What are the main things that have to kind of stay through there?
That's a really good question, and I think part of my view on it is because I'm a scientist, because I'm a chemist, and I have a pretty rigid view of what I consider possible and what I consider not possible. So to me, a lot of things are fantastical. I mean, steampunk to me feels like fantasy because if you sit down and figure out the physics of a steam engine, it can't actually carry an airship in the air. It's not possible. So it's kind of ironic, even though I have a zine that's labeled fantasy and is very much a niche. Pretty much all of this stuff to me is fantastical in nature. So I'm very happy to see when things are blended, to see when science fiction is blended. We've done 2 theme months in BCS in the past several years of science fantasy, stuff kind of like Dune that feels fantastical but has science-ish things in it, laser guns instead of swords. And I love that kind of stuff. So I would love to see them mixed and to see those barriers that are really artificial sort of demarcations, to see those erode and to see stuff like you see in Warhammer where it's swords and jetpacks and rockets and whatever, to see stuff like that become just as common as anything else. I think that'd be great.
What about you, Neil? Do you have thoughts on science fiction or anything, or that line that people like to talk about? Is it fantasy? Is it science fiction? And where's this going?
Oh, I don't care what the line is. I know what I like and I enjoy it, and I don't like putting labels on it. We call ourselves a science fiction and fantasy magazine since that's a nice big umbrella. Mm-hmm. But if you had me go through and say which stories were science fiction and which were fantasy, I would refuse. In fact, the only way we collect submissions data. We'll publish numbers about how many science fiction stories we've received and all of that. And that's purely because the authors have told us what they think it is. So I refuse to get involved in that. It seems like a wasted time from my perspective. It's getting bogged down in the details, and I'm much more interested in the story.
Do you think that in the future, as people try and push the boundaries of all the genres more, that line is going to blur so much that the distinctions between genre fiction are not going to matter to fans as much, that delineation, it's going to be a melting pot of kind of things, or are people going to still care about genres and boxes and stuff that they can put things in?
People have wanted to get rid of the genre labels for a while, and the actual reality is that they're there for marketing purposes. And as long as we're still trying to sell things, they're going to still be there. And there'll be people arguing about it because that's what they love to do. And
well said.
It gives them something to talk about.
Yeah.
But I don't see it going away. I think that the audience will grow. I think it has been growing. I think this is an excellent time to be a short fiction editor or reader. The field is very strong and going off in different directions that are still positive. So for me, the more exciting stuff that's going on is how the internet sort of opened us up to the world, and all these years we haven't really taken advantage of that. We have readers all over the place, but we haven't really been pulling in authors from all over the place. So I think that's what we're going to start seeing, is a more globalization of the field, seeing more works in translation coming over, and more actual readership in other countries. Right now, Clarkesworld has about, I would say, 70% of its readership centered in the United States, and maybe the next 25 focused mostly within UK, Canada, and Australia. So I think that we're seeing weird little pockets. Like for some reason, there's a small pocket of podcast listeners in Iran. That to me is really exciting, and that's where I think the field's going to grow the most. Is new blood coming in, and it's going to strengthen it a lot.
That's interesting. So is that same reasoning that's got you doing the Chinese translations on a monthly basis to open up that market, like the burgeoning Chinese kind of market, have them more involved?
Well, it was an opportunity that presented itself back in April. We had been running a few translations. Ken Liu has done some amazing work in bringing Chinese stories to English-speaking markets, and we were approached by Storycom to see if there was something we could do together. And it's spun out from there, and this is just the beginning. We have plans to go further down the line, but to start, we wanted to bring in more stories. The world's largest science fiction magazine is in China. It's not an American magazine. It's SF World, and there's a lot of people reading and writing science fiction over there. So I think it's time to take a look. What we've seen so far has been amazing. I think it was just right place, right time. And we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, that's really exciting, actually. That's interesting and very smart, too, to kind of explore that. What about you, John? What's your future? And what's your views on the future of what we do?
Well, I'm hoping to expand the reach of Lightspeed and all the other short fiction markets with via this Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy that I'm doing. Obviously, given that it's American focused, it's not going to be global like what Neil's talking about. Although certainly people all over the world could pick it up and buy it. But I'm hoping to reach more of the American and English-speaking readership. Get those mainstream readers who probably would like most of the science fiction that we're publishing, like in short fiction, because it's like the stuff we're publishing isn't probably what most people think of as science fiction or fantasy anyway. Like they're thinking of big blockbuster movies that have lots of explosions and guns and stuff, and it's like there's a little bit
Godzilla.
of that. Yeah, there's a little bit of that in science fiction short stories, but not that much. And a lot of it's it's barely even genre at all, and a lot of it has very lovely prose, just like you would expect to find in anything in the New Yorker or whatever your favorite literary journal is. So I'm really hoping to capture a lot more of that audience. Maybe expose them to it via the Best American series, because that's a brand that they might trust from because it's been around for 100 years or whatever, and so they'll try it because it has that brand on it and they trust it, and then maybe that'll turn them into genre readers. Maybe they'll start picking up the magazines to find the places where the stories in the book came from and go check them out. It's always what I hope will happen with any kind of year's best, but I don't know how much it actually happens. I'm hoping it'll happen with this one, and I mean, since I'm the series editor, I have a lot to say in what direction everything goes in. I'm hoping that I can try to push that and make it like an agenda. If I make it my agenda, maybe I can make that come to fruition.
Yeah, well, it's a neat opportunity, and you definitely have some competition, I guess, in that category with the year's best. And people, how are I guess two parts question: how are they giving you one shot with that, or a couple of shots, and then also how are you separating yourself from those the animals that have been around forever too, that are competition in that field in the year's best kind of category?
Well, Houghton Mifflin agreed to 2 books up front, and so we're going to do at least 2 volumes, and then we'll see how it goes. So, I mean, that's fine. It's actually, I had actually pushed, I had asked my agent to push for more, but then he's like, no, 2 is good, because then we see how it does, and then maybe we can negotiate for a better deal after that. And then and because, he and I were both assuming that, we think that this should do well. And, we have Joe Hill as the guest editor for the first volume, and we haven't lined up the second volume yet, but, that's the other thing that will help this series reach more readers, is that with that model of having me as the series editor, so a lot, the genre people know me already, but then with the guest editors being somebody who's sort of adjacent to the genre but not really part of it, like Joe Hill. I mean, he's a horror writer, but I mean, he runs in the mainstream crowd,
Right, yeah.
And so he has reached that most of our other year's best editors don't have, and so people who are fans of his may pick pick up the books, and then whoever we get for the second one, it's kind of be the same deal. So yeah, I mean, we have 2 books under contract, and I'm working on the first one now. That'll be out in October 2015. So it's quite a ways away before it's going to come out. But it's been really interesting to just sort of devote myself to reading everything that I can find, because I've never actually done that where I've really tried to read everything in the field that's published in a year. I mean, I certainly tried to keep up with everything, but I've never done never done nearly as much as I'm doing with this. So it's been really interesting to see all the stuff that's out there.
Yeah, but that's a daunting task you've set yourself out to, is reading everything on the internet. I applaud you for that.
Oh, well, and print as well. So don't
print,
forget
right?
That. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool opportunity. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the Year's Best. You got work cut out for you there. That's neat.
Yeah.
And then Neil's taking over China, and that's a pretty daunting task too. So. Yeah, and of course Scott is digging the Colorado River there, so that's
right.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for this conversation. It's been fun, and I think people are going to love to hear your thoughts on this stuff.
Cool.
John, are you coming to World Fantasy?
I am.
Awesome. Oh, okay, cool. So we do see you there, because the 3 of us are going to be at Capclave, Neil, Scott, and I.
Yep.
But we're going to see you there. But then we'll all see you at World. Are you going, Neil? Are you going to World Fantasy?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, we could have done it then, but it works out fine this way too. So.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, I wish you a good night.
All right. Cool.
Cheers.
Take care.
You too.
Good night.